I was 33 years old when my life fell apart in less than 3 hours. At 6:15 p.m., my manager called me into a glass conference room and told me the company was cutting positions. My name was on the list. Just like that, the job I'd spent 7 years building was gone. I remember staring at the severance packet in my hands while people around me avoided eye contact. Some looked sorry. Others looked relieved it wasn't them. I drove home in silence. The entire way, I kept thinking about what I was going to tell my parents. 3 years earlier, after my divorce, I had moved back into their house temporarily, just until I get back on my feet. I had promised. Watching from which country? Comment below. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Life had other plans. Housing prices kept rising. Bills piled up, and although I earned decent money, saving enough to buy a place of my own wasn't easy. Still, I paid rent every month. I paid my share of utilities. I never asked them for money. So when I walked through the front door that evening, I expected disappointment. I wasn't prepared for what happened instead. My father was sitting in his recliner watching television. My mother was in the kitchen. "I lost my job today," I said quietly. The room went silent. My mother slowly turned around. "You got fired?" "Nope, the company downsized." My father snorted. "That's what everyone says." I felt a sting in my chest. "Dad, that's not what happened." He muted the television. Then he looked directly at me. "What exactly are we supposed to do with you now?" For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. He wasn't. My mother crossed her arms. "We've been patient long enough, Emma." Patient? I had been paying them every month. I had helped with groceries. I drove my mother to appointments. I handled every technology problem in the house. But suddenly none of that mattered. "You are 33 years old," she continued. "At some point, you need to stop depending on us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I just lost my job today." "Exactly," my father said coldly, "and we're not interested in supporting another unemployed adult." The words hit harder than losing the job itself. Then he stood up and pointed toward the hallway. "You have until tomorrow morning to leave." I stared at him. My own father, the man who always preached family loyalty, the man who told everyone how important family was, and now he was throwing me out less than 2 hours after I lost my job. What neither of them knew was that I wasn't nearly as helpless as they thought. And within a few days, a secret connected to a beach house on the coast was about to change everything. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice again. "You have until tomorrow morning to leave." Not, "We'll figure this out together." Not, "I'm sorry you're going through this." Just leave. Around 3 in the morning, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the family photos hanging on the wall. There was one from my college graduation, another from my wedding, one from a beach vacation we'd taken years ago. Looking at those pictures hurt more than anything, because the people smiling in those frames felt like strangers now. By sunrise, I had packed everything I could fit into my SUV. Neither of my parents offered to help. My mother stood near the front door holding a coffee mug. My father never even got out of his chair. As I carried my final suitcase outside, my mother said something I'll never forget. "Maybe this is the wake-up call you needed." I stopped walking. A wake-up call? I'd worked since I was 16. I had built a career. I had survived a painful divorce without asking them for $1. And somehow, losing my job made me the family failure. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded, because at that moment, I realized something important. You can't reason with people who have already decided your value. I got into my SUV and drove away. Neither of them came outside to stop me. Neither of them called. Neither of them apologized. And that hurt more than I can describe. For the first few hours, I had no destination. I just drove. The road stretched along the coastline, and memories kept flooding back. Especially memories of my grandmother. Grandma Rose. She was the only person in the family who never judged people based on money. When my marriage collapsed, she never asked what I did wrong. When I moved back home, she never called me a burden. She would simply smile and say, "Life isn't a straight line, sweetheart." She passed away 2 years earlier, and losing her had left a hole in my life that never fully. As I drove, my phone suddenly rang. The caller ID made me grip the steering wheel tighter. It was Samuel Preston, my grandmother's attorney. I hadn't spoken to him in months. "Emma?" he said. "Yes. I've been trying to reach you." A strange feeling settled in my stomach. "Why?" "There are some documents regarding your grandmother's estate that require your attention." I frowned. I thought everything was settled after she passed. "Not everything." His tone immediately caught my attention. "What does that mean?" There was a brief pause. "I think it's better if we discuss this in person." Normally, I would have pushed for answers, but something in his voice told me this wasn't a simple paperwork issue. An hour later, I walked into his office. He greeted me warmly and motioned toward a chair. Then he opened a file folder. What he showed me next left me speechless. Inside were property documents, deeds, ownership records, tax statements. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the address. My heart nearly stopped. I knew that address. Everyone in my family knew it. The beach house. The beautiful oceanfront property where we spent vacations growing up. The house my parents constantly bragged about to friends. The house they treated like the family's greatest asset. I looked up at him. "Why are you showing me this?" Samuel folded his hands. "Because according to your grandmother's final instructions, ownership transferred to you." I blinked. "What? Your grandmother left the beach house entirely to you?" The room felt suddenly smaller. I honestly thought I'd misunderstood him. "No, that can't be right." "It is." He slid the paperwork across the desk. Every document confirmed the same thing. The house belonged to me. Not my parents. Not the family. Me. I sat there in complete shock. For years, my parents had acted as though the property was practically theirs. They hosted parties there, invited friends there, made plans for renovations, talked openly about passing it down someday. Apparently, they never actually owned it. Grandma had, and after her death, she had quietly arranged for ownership to pass directly to me. "Did they know?" I asked. Samuel slowly shook his head. "No." 100 emotions crashed through me at once. Confusion, shock, disbelief, and then something else. Understanding. Suddenly, certain memories started making sense. Grandma's private conversations, the way she'd always encouraged me to become independent, the way she'd often squeeze my hand and say, "One day, you'll understand why I made certain decisions." I understood now. She had seen things I hadn't. Maybe she knew exactly who my parents were beneath the surface. Maybe she knew how quickly they would turn on someone when money became involved. Samuel handed me a sealed envelope. "This was for you." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandma. The sight of her handwriting instantly brought tears to my eyes. I hadn't seen it since before she died. I carefully unfolded the paper. And as I began reading the first few lines, my entire understanding of my family started to change. Because Grandma had left me far more than a beach house. She had left me the truth. And that truth was about to destroy the image my parents had spent years building. I sat in Samuel Preston's office with tears blurring my vision as I unfolded my grandmother's letter. The paper trembled in my hands. For a moment, I couldn't even read it. I just stared at her familiar handwriting. It felt like hearing her voice again. Finally, I took a deep breath and began reading. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I am gone. And I imagine life has probably become complicated. It usually does before it gets better." That sounded exactly like Grandma Rose. I smiled through my tears. Then I kept reading. "I am leaving the beach house to you because you understand something the rest of the family never did. A home is not an asset. It is a responsibility. It is where people heal. You have always valued people more than possessions." I swallowed hard. The next paragraph hit even harder. "Your parents may not understand this decision. They never understood many of my decisions. But I have watched how they treat people when life is going well, and more importantly, how they treat people when life is going badly. My chest tightened. Grandma had seen it too. She had noticed the same thing I was only beginning to understand. The letter continued. Characters revealed during another person's struggle. Never forget that. I sat there in silence after finishing the letter. Everything suddenly felt different. The beach house wasn't simply property. It was Grandma's final message, her final act of faith in me. And somehow, she had known I would need it. Samuel allowed me a few minutes to compose myself before speaking again. There's one more thing. I looked up. What? The property has no mortgage. I blinked. No mortgage? None. I stared at him. Oceanfront property. Fully paid off. Worth well over $1 million. And it belonged entirely to me. For a few seconds, I honestly didn't know what to think. Less than 24 hours earlier, my parents had thrown me out because they believed I was a financial burden. Now I was sitting there realizing I was probably the wealthiest person in my immediate family. The irony was almost unbelievable. But what happened next shocked me even more. 3 days later, my phone started ringing. It was my mother, the first call since I had been kicked out. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again, and again. By the 6th missed call, I knew something had changed. Finally, I listened to the voicemail. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. Emma, sweetheart, call me back. We need to talk. Sweetheart. Interesting. 3 days ago, I was an unemployed disappointment. Now, I was sweetheart. I didn't return the call. Instead, I waited. Within an hour, my father called. Then my brother. Then my aunt. Then 2 cousins. The entire family suddenly seemed interested in my well-being. I knew exactly why. Someone had discovered the truth. The next morning, my father showed up at the small coastal hotel where I was staying. I hadn't told him where I was, which meant somebody had helped him find me. When I walked into the lobby and saw him standing there, I almost laughed. He looked nervous. I had never seen my father nervous before. Emma, he said, we need to talk. I folded my arms. About what? The beach house. There it was, straight to the point. Not an apology. Not concern. The beach house. I nodded toward a nearby seating area. We sat down. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. There seems to have been some misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I nearly laughed again. What misunderstanding? Your grandmother's paperwork. I looked directly into his eyes. There was no misunderstanding. His jaw tightened. For the first time, he realized he couldn't control the conversation. The house has always been part of the family. No, I replied calmly. It belonged to Grandma. He didn't like that answer. I could see it immediately. Emma, be reasonable. Reasonable. The same man who threw me out 48 hours after I lost my job was asking me to be reasonable. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Then he leaned forward. You know your mother and I have invested years maintaining that property. I stared at him. Years maintaining it? Grandma paid the taxes. Grandma paid for repairs. Grandma paid for insurance. Everyone knew it. But now, he was rewriting history. I finally asked the question I'd been holding inside. Dad, why are you really here? Silence. Then he said it. We think ownership should be transferred. There it was. The truth. Not concern. Not reconciliation. It's not love. Property. Money. Control. I suddenly understood everything. The moment they believed I had nothing, they discarded me. The moment they discovered I had something valuable, they came running back. I stood up. The conversation was over. His expression changed immediately. Emma. No. Listen. No, Dad. For the first time in my life, I interrupted him. You threw me out. His face hardened. That isn't what happened. The anger that had been building for years finally surfaced. Really? My voice echoed through the lobby. You gave me one night to pack my life and leave. Several people turned to look. I didn't care. You didn't ask if I had somewhere to go. I took a step closer. You didn't ask if I was okay. Another step. You didn't even call afterward. His eyes dropped because he knew I was right. For once, there was no argument available, no excuse, no way to spin the truth. Then something happened that I never expected. He looked ashamed, not angry, ashamed. For a second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said something else. Your mother is devastated. I laughed, actually laughed. The sound surprised even me. Devastated? Yes. 'Cause she lost her daughter? He didn't answer. I already knew why. Because she lost the beach house. The silence confirmed it. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke free. Years of seeking approval. Years of trying to earn love. Years of convincing myself that if I worked harder, achieved more, sacrificed enough, my parents would value me. The truth was simpler. Their love had conditions. Grandma's never did. That was the difference. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Relatives called. Friends of the family called. Even people I barely knew suddenly had opinions. I heard every argument imaginable. Family comes first. Do the right thing. Your parents deserve it. Think about everything they've done for you. What nobody mentioned was what my parents had done to me. Nobody talked about the night they abandoned their daughter when she needed support. Nobody talked about the humiliation. Nobody talked about the betrayal. Eventually, I stopped answering calls altogether. Then one afternoon, I drove to the beach house alone. The weather was beautiful. The ocean stretched endlessly across the horizon. Waves rolled against the shore. Seagulls drifted through the sky. For the first time since inheriting it, I walked through every room by myself. Grandma's favorite chairs still sat near the window. The old photographs remained on the walls. The scent of the ocean drifted through the open balcony doors. I stood there for nearly an hour, thinking, remembering, healing. And then I made a decision that would change everything. Not just for me, for my parents too. Because after everything they had done, I finally understood something powerful. Revenge wasn't about taking something from them. The real revenge was making sure they had to live with the consequences of their own choices. And I was about to give them exactly that. I sat on the balcony of the beach house as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of gold and orange. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not happy, not victorious, just calm. The anger that had consumed me since the night my parents threw me out was finally fading, and as I listened to the waves crashing against the shore, I realized something important. I didn't want revenge the way I once thought I did. I didn't want screaming matches. I didn't want public humiliation. I didn't want to destroy anyone. What I wanted was freedom. Freedom from needing my parents' approval. Freedom from their judgment. Freedom from the endless cycle of trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. That realization changed everything. The next morning, I called Samuel. I've made a decision, I told him. He was quiet for a moment. What kind of decision? I looked out at the ocean. The beach house stays in my name. His response was immediate. I think your grandmother would be pleased, but that wasn't the only decision I had made. Over the following month, I used part of my savings and some resources. Grandma had quietly left behind to renovate sections of the property. Nothing extravagant, just improvements, fresh paint, updated furniture, necessary repairs. I wanted the house to become something meaningful, something that reflected Grandma's values. While the work was being completed, my parents continued trying to contact me. The messages became more desperate. At first they were polite, then emotional, then angry, then polite again. The pattern was obvious. Every conversation eventually returned to the same topic. The house. Always the house. Never the relationship. Never the hurt. Never the betrayal. One afternoon, my mother left a voicemail that finally convinced me to meet them. Please, Emma, we need to talk face to face. A week later, we sat together inside a small restaurant overlooking the marina. It was the first time I had seen them since the hotel confrontation. They looked older, more tired, more anxious. For several awkward minutes, nobody spoke. Then, my mother reached across the table. "Sweetheart, we miss you." I looked at her hand, but didn't take it. A year earlier, that sentence would have melted my heart. Now I needed more than words. "You miss me?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Of course." I took a slow breath. "Then why didn't either of you call me after you threw me out?" Neither answered. The silence said everything. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We made mistakes." It was the closest thing to an apology I had heard, but it still wasn't an apology. I looked directly at him. "Mistakes are forgetting a birthday." His eyes lowered. "Throwing your daughter out the day she loses her job isn't a mistake." Neither of them spoke. For once, there was nowhere for them to hide. No excuses. No justifications. Only the truth. Then my mother started crying. Real tears. Not dramatic tears. Not manipulative tears. Just tears. "I never thought you'd leave us forever." That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because for the first time I believed she was being honest. Not about the house. About losing me? The problem was that honesty had arrived too late. Much too late. I softened my voice. "I'm not leaving forever." Both of them looked up, but things can't go back to how they were. My father nodded slowly. As painful as it was, he seemed to understand. Then he asked the question we had all been avoiding. "What happens with the beach house?" I almost smiled. Even now, it had found its way back into the conversation. But this time, I was prepared. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. My parents exchanged confused glances. I slid the papers across the table. My father opened them. His eyes widened. My mother's mouth fell open. The documents outlined the creation of a small nonprofit retreat program. The beach house would host women rebuilding their lives after divorce, job loss, financial hardship, and personal crises. Women who needed a safe place to start over? Women exactly like the person I had been only weeks earlier. My grandmother's home would become a place of healing, a place of second chances, a place where people weren't judged by temporary failures. Tears filled my eyes as I explained it. Grandma believed homes should help people. Neither parent said a word. They simply stared at the papers. Then my father quietly removed his glasses. For several seconds he looked down at the table. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Your grandmother would be proud of you." The words stunned me, not because they were dramatic, but because they were sincere. For once, there was no hidden agenda. No manipulation. No argument. Just truth. And strangely, that mattered. A lot. Over the following months, the retreat program began operating successfully. Women arrived carrying pain, fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion. Many left with hope, purpose, confidence. Watching that transformation became one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. As for my career, things improved too. A former colleague connected me with a new opportunity. Within a few months, I was working again, this time for a company that valued me, this time with a healthier perspective on success. But the biggest change wasn't financial, it was personal. For the first time in my life, I stopped measuring my worth through other people's approval, especially my parents. Our relationship slowly improved, not because everything was magically fixed. It wasn't. Some wounds take years to heal. Some scars never completely disappear. But boundaries existed now, respect existed now, and accountability existed now. 1 year after the night they threw me out, we gathered at the beach house for a small memorial celebration honoring Grandma Rose. Friends, guests, women whose lives had been changed through the retreat, family members. Everyone shared stories about her kindness, her wisdom, her generosity. As the evening ended, I stood alone on the balcony overlooking the ocean. The same balcony where I had once sat heartbroken and angry. The waves rolled across the shore below. The wind carried the scent of salt water through the air, and for a moment I felt Grandma's presence everywhere. The beach house had never been about money. My parents had thought it was. I had thought it was, but Grandma understood the truth. The house was a test, per lesson, a final gift. The night my parents threw me out, they believed I had lost everything. What they never realized was that their betrayal would lead me directly to the greatest inheritance of all. Not the property, not the money, not the ocean view, the confidence to know my worth. And once I found that, nobody could ever take it away from me again.